Liam walked beside me, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets like always. He looked so casual, so steady, like the boy I'd grown up with. The boy who knew all my secrets. The boy who had carried me home when I twisted my ankle in middle school, who had stayed up all night helping me study for exams, who had never once let me down. But tonight, something felt different. The engagement party had ended hours ago, yet my cheeks still burned from watching him dance with that brunette in the glittering red dress. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself Liam was my best friend, not my anything else. But my heart didn't seem to listen. We stopped at the corner where our paths usually split. This was where I'd say goodnight and he'd smile that lazy smile and walk the rest of the way home. But he didn't move. Instead, he stepped closer. Just a fraction, but enough for my breath to catch. His eyes searched mine, the kind of searching that felt like it saw straight into me, past the layers of laughter and shared history, right into the part of me I kept locked away. "Emma," he said softly, almost like he was testing how my name felt on his tongue. And then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't planned. It was a burst of heat and longing that left me dizzy, my hands fisting in his jacket without even thinking. I tasted the faint hint of the wine we'd shared earlier, felt the steady thump of his heart against my chest. When he pulled back, the night felt quieter, heavier. I couldn't find my voice. Neither could he. We just stared at each other for a long, breathless moment. And then, without a word, we turned and walked away. I didn't know it then, but that kiss would change everything.
Welcome to another episode of Ever After. Kindly comment where you are listening from and subscribe so you don't miss out on our next episode.
Chapter 1. The Comfort Zone. The coffee shop on Main Street had been our place since high school. The bell above the door chimed as I pushed it open, and the familiar aroma of roasted beans wrapped around me like a hug. Liam was already at our usual booth in the back, nursing a black coffee and scrolling through his phone. He looked up when I slid into the seat across from him, and his easy grin made my chest tighten in that way I was still pretending to ignore. "Morning, Trouble," he said, sliding the muffin plate toward me. "I got you the blueberry one. Don't say I never do anything for you." I rolled my eyes, peeling back the paper wrapper. "You always get me the blueberry one, and you always act like it's some grand act of charity." "It is," he teased, leaning back with that effortless charm that made everyone in this town like him. Everyone, including me. It had been 2 weeks since the kiss, 2 weeks of pretending it hadn't happened, of slipping back into our old rhythms, morning coffees, late-night phone calls, stupid inside jokes no one else would get. But sometimes, I'd catch him looking at me in a way that made my stomach flip, and I'd have to look away. "So," he said, sipping his coffee, "are we still on for Friday night? Movie marathon? I promise I won't make you watch another bad 80s action flick." I smiled despite myself. "Good. Because last time I fell asleep halfway through." "That was the point," he said with a smirk. "You're nicer when you're unconscious." I threw a sugar packet at him, and he caught it mid-air like the show-off he was. We laughed, and for a second, it almost felt normal again. Almost. The truth was, I missed the simplicity of before that kiss. Before I started noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, or how his voice dipped lower when he talked to me late at night. "Emma," he said suddenly, pulling me out of my thoughts. His tone was softer now, more serious. "You've been quiet lately. You okay?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just a lot on my mind." He studied me for a long moment, like he didn't quite believe me, but then he nodded. "All right. But you know you can tell me anything, right?" I did. And that was the problem. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from my sister flashed on the screen. "Dad's asking if you'll come home for dinner tonight, says it's important." Important. In my family, that word usually meant trouble. I glanced back at Liam, who was still watching me, his brow slightly furrowed. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I lied. "Just family stuff." I didn't tell him that a part of me wished I could skip dinner entirely and just stay here, in this booth, with him, where it was warm, safe, because out there, in the real world, things were starting to change, and I wasn't sure I was ready. Chapter 2. The Almost Confession. Friday night arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made the stars look sharper than usual. Liam's porch light was on when I climbed the steps, balancing a bag of microwave popcorn and my blanket under one arm. He opened the door before I could knock, grinning like I'd just made his week. Finally, I was about to send out a search party. I stepped inside, the warmth of his house wrapping around me. It smelled faintly of cinnamon and laundry detergent, his scent. It was ridiculous how something so simple could make my pulse jump. "I had to stop and grab snacks," I said, lifting the bag. "Because unlike you, I think ahead." He took the popcorn from me, his fingers brushing mine. Just a light touch, but it was enough to send a shiver up my arm. We settled onto the couch, my blanket draped over both of us. The movie was already queued up on his TV, but he didn't press play. Instead, he leaned back, his arm stretched along the back of the couch, close enough that if I moved just a little, my shoulder would rest against him. "Emma," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "Can I ask you something?" My heart gave a traitorous thump. "Sure." His gaze searched mine, serious and almost vulnerable. "That night, a couple weeks ago, when you—" He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "When you kissed me." I froze. Every nerve in my body felt like it had been set on fire. "What about it?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking more unsure than I'd ever seen him. "I keep wondering if it meant something to you. Because it—" He stopped, shook his head. "Forget it. I'm being stupid." It took everything in me not to blurt out the truth. That I thought about that kiss constantly. That it had ruined me for every other man. But fear wrapped around my words like a vice. "It was I started, then faltered. My throat felt dry. "It was a mistake, Liam. We were both tired and—" His expression shifted, guarded. "Right. A mistake." He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Makes sense." The hurt in his voice was like a punch to my chest. I wanted to take it back, to tell him it wasn't a mistake at all. But before I could, the popcorn bag in the microwave popped loudly, breaking the moment. "I'll get it," I said quickly, jumping up before my emotions could betray me. In the kitchen, I gripped the counter and closed my eyes. I'd just pushed him away when every part of me wanted to pull him closer. But what if I told him the truth and it ruined everything? What if he didn't feel the same way? When I returned to the couch, he was staring at the TV, the easy warmth between us replaced by something quieter, sadder. We watched the movie without speaking much, but halfway through when I shifted the blanket, his hand brushed against mine again. This time he didn't move it away, and neither did I. Chapter 3. The Catalyst. The next morning my phone buzzed far too early for a Saturday. "Liam, come to the park. Bring coffee. Emergency." I groaned, still wrapped in my blanket, but something in the way he'd phrased it made me grab my keys without overthinking. The park was quiet, dew still clinging to the grass. I spotted him on the old wooden bench near the pond, elbows resting on his knees. He looked rattled. I handed him the coffee. "Okay, what's the emergency? Did you run out of clean socks again?" He gave me a half smile but didn't take the bait. "I got a call this morning. From Boston." My stomach dropped. "Boston? As in the job I applied for months ago and forgot about. They want me there in 2 weeks." 2 weeks. The words lodged in my chest. I forced a bright tone. "That's amazing, Liam, really. You've wanted this for—" "I don't know if I want it anymore," he interrupted, his voice rough. "Everything's different now." I blinked. "Different how?" He stared out at the water, jaw tight. I don't want to leave if it means losing what I have here. His eyes flicked to mine for just a second before sliding away. The air between us felt charged like it had the night we kissed. But before I could untangle my thoughts, a woman's voice broke the moment. Liam. We both turned to see a tall brunette approaching, dressed like she'd stepped out of a magazine. She smiled at him like they shared a history. Wow, it's been ages. Liam stood, a little too quickly. Claire. Hey. Claire. The ex-girlfriend, the one he'd never quite talked about without changing the subject. My chest tightened as they hugged briefly. She glanced at me with polite curiosity. And you are? I'm Emma, I said, forcing a smile. His friend. Her perfectly arched brows lifted slightly, as if friend explained everything she needed to know. They exchanged a few minutes of small talk, enough for me to realize she wasn't here by accident. She mentioned she'd moved back to town for good and would love to catch up. When she finally walked away, Liam sat again, rubbing the back of his neck. She just showed up, he muttered. Right, I said, staring at the ripples in the pond. And you're just going to catch up? He glanced at me sharply. It's not like that. But the old ache of being just the friend was already curling in my chest. Between Boston calling and Claire reappearing, I felt the ground shifting beneath us, and for the first time since that kiss, I wondered if maybe I'd already lost him. Chapter 4. Forced proximity sparks change. The rain came down in sheets, turning the roads into slick ribbons of silver. I was just about to close up the bookstore when my phone buzzed again. Liam, car broke down, near your place. Can I crash? I stared at the message for a second. My mind instantly replayed the last 2 weeks, Boston's looming offer, Claire's sudden reappearance, and the way Liam had been quieter lately, almost guarded. But my thumbs still typed the only answer they could. Me. Yeah. I'll make up the couch. By the time he arrived, soaked through despite the jacket, the storm had turned the sky an eerie shade of violet. I handed him a towel and tried not to notice how his shirt clung to every lean, strong line of him. Sorry for the invasion, he said, rubbing his hair dry. Garage says they can't look at it till Monday. No problem, I said lightly. It's not like you haven't crashed here before. Except it was different. Because the last time I hadn't kissed him yet. And now every little thing. The brush of his fingers when he handed me the towel, the sound of his laugh as I told him the couch blanket was haunted, felt heavier. We ended up in the kitchen, making grilled cheese sandwiches because the storm had knocked out the power. Candles flickered on the counter, casting shadows across his face. You've been avoiding me, he said suddenly, eyes steady on mine. I nearly dropped the spatula. What? No, I've been... Emma. His tone was low, serious. After that night, after the kiss, you've been different. Heat rushed to my cheeks. So have you. Silence stretched between us, only broken by the hiss of butter in the pan. Finally, he said, I didn't plan for that kiss to happen, but I haven't stopped thinking about it since. I gripped the counter. Then why the mixed signals, Liam? 1 minute you're pulling away, the next you're... He stepped closer, his presence filling the small kitchen. Because you matter too much, and I'm afraid if we cross that line for real, I won't be able to go back. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. Maybe I don't want to go back, I whispered. His eyes searched mine for what felt like forever. Then the power flickered back on, startling us both. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair like he was pulling himself together. We should eat before it gets cold, he said gruffly. We did, but every bite tasted like something had shifted, and I had no idea if it was the beginning of us or the beginning of the end. Chapter 5. Confessions and Confrontations. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the streets glittering under a pale gold sky. Liam was still asleep on the couch, one arm slung over his eyes, hair mussed in a way that was unfairly attractive. I told myself I was just making coffee, not hovering, but the truth was I didn't know how to act around him anymore. When he finally stirred, he sat up and looked at me like I was the only thing in the room worth noticing. "Morning," he said, voice low and rough with sleep. "Morning," I murmured back, pushing a mug toward him. We drank in silence for a few minutes before he set his cup down with a thud. "Emma, we can't keep pretending nothing happened." I swallowed hard. "I'm not pretending, I'm just scared." His gaze was sharp, but there was something vulnerable under it. "Yeah," I admitted. "Scared I'll lose you. Scared I'll mess it up. You're my best friend, Liam. You've been the one constant in my life since—" My voice cracked. "Since before I even knew what love meant." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "And what does it mean now?" I hesitated, my pulse thundering in my ears. "It means that when you walk into a room, my heart trips over itself. It means I can't look at you without remembering that kiss. It means I don't know how to be just friends anymore." His jaw flexed like he was holding something back. "You think it's any easier for me? Emma, I've been in love with you for years. I just didn't want to risk losing you." My breath caught. "Then why didn't you—" "Because you deserved better than a guy who didn't have his life together. Better than someone who might hurt you without meaning to. But when you kissed me that night, all my reasons for staying away fell apart." I stared at him, my chest tight. "So now what? We pretend we didn't say this? We go back to safe?" "No." He stood, closing the distance between us until his hand hovered over mine. "We figure it out, even if it's messy, even if it scares the hell out of us." I felt the heat of his skin, the steady strength of his presence, and part of me wanted to just give in. But the other part, the cautious, self-protective part, still whispered of all the ways this could go wrong. Before I could answer, a knock at the door broke the moment. I opened it to find Claire standing there, rain still clinging to her hair, looking like trouble wrapped in charm. "Hope I'm not interrupting," she said with a smile that told me she absolutely was. Liam's hand dropped from mine. My heart did the same. Chapter 6. Jealousy and Unspoken Tensions. Claire stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her perfume sweeping into the apartment ahead of her like she owned the place. She gave Liam a once-over, lingering on the faint stubble on his jaw, then flicked her gaze to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I was in the neighborhood," she said lightly. "Thought I'd drop by. Didn't realize I'd be interrupting." "You're not interrupting," Liam said, his voice calm but distant. "Not interrupting?" My heart gave a sour twist. 2 minutes ago, he'd been telling me he'd been in love with me for years. Now he was slipping right back into polite, easy Liam mode, the kind of mode that made every woman feel like she had his attention. Claire noticed. Of course she did. She perched on the arm of the couch, leaning toward him like a cat stretching in a sunny window. "I missed you at the gallery opening last night. Everyone asked where you were." "I had other plans," Liam replied simply. Her eyes darted to me. "With Emma?" The words were sugar-coated, but I could taste the sharpness underneath. "Yes," Liam said, without flinching. Something warm bloomed in my chest at that, but Claire only tilted her head, assessing me like I was a puzzle she'd just decided she wanted to solve. "Interesting," she murmured, then looked back at him. "You two have always been close." The unspoken but not that close hung in the air. I busied myself clearing coffee cups, pretending not to notice the way her perfectly manicured hand brushed his arm when she laughed at something he said. My grip on the mugs tightened until I was sure the ceramic might crack. When I came back from the kitchen, they were reminiscing about some party years ago, one I'd skipped because I'd been sick. They were smiling, their voices low, and something in me snapped. "Claire," I said a little too brightly, "was there a reason you came by?" Her gaze slid to me, cool and appraising. "Actually, yes. I'm hosting a charity dinner this weekend. I was hoping Liam would be my date." The words hit me like a slap. My throat tightened, but I forced a smile. I'm sure he'll let you know if he's free. Liam glanced between us, clearly picking up on the tension. Claire, But she cut him off with a breezy, "Think about it, I'll text you the details." Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her, leaving a faint trace of perfume and a storm brewing between us. Liam turned to me, his brow furrowed. "Emma, don't," I said, holding up a hand. "You don't owe me an explanation. We're just friends, right?" He stepped closer, frustration in his eyes. "That's not what I want, and you know it." "Do I?" My voice wavered. "Because every time I think we're on the same page, someone like Claire waltzes in and you let her." He didn't answer right away, and the silence felt louder than any argument. Finally, he said quietly, "Then maybe I need to prove to you where I stand." The look in his eyes was a promise and a warning. Chapter 7. The First Breaking Point. It had been 2 days since Claire's visit, and Liam hadn't brought her up once, which should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like an invisible weight pressing on my chest, because silence didn't mean something wasn't there. I was at my laptop pretending to work when my phone buzzed. A notification from the local Art Society's social media page lit up the screen. I clicked without thinking. There, in glossy high resolution, was Liam, in a black suit, glass in hand, smiling for the camera, and standing beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, was Claire. The caption, "Charity dinner hosts Claire Duval. Liam Bennett raise record funds for community art programs." My stomach clenched. My first instinct was to tell myself it didn't matter, that maybe it was just business. But business didn't explain the way she was leaning toward him, the way he was smiling, not at her, but with her. When Liam knocked on my door that evening, I was ready for him, or at least I thought I was. He stepped in, holding a takeout bag. "I brought Thai, figured you didn't feel like cooking." "That was thoughtful," I said evenly, taking the bag and setting it on the counter. "Was this before or after your charity dinner with Claire?" He froze mid-step. "Emma, you didn't think to tell me?" My voice cracked. "I had to find out from a social media post." "It wasn't a date," he said quickly. "She asked me to help with the event." "And you just said yes? After everything?" His jaw tightened. "What's everything supposed to mean?" "Liam, you told me you've been in love with me for years. You said you wanted to prove where you stand. But one phone call from Claire and suddenly you're at her side in a suit, smiling for the cameras." "It wasn't like that," he said. But there was an edge in his voice now. "Emma, you're making this into something it's not." "Am I?" I stepped closer, my chest tight. "Or am I finally realizing that you like keeping me close enough to want you, but far enough so you can keep your options open?" His eyes darkened. "That's not fair." "What's not fair is asking me to risk my heart when you won't even risk a conversation with someone like Claire." We stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Finally, he exhaled sharply and ran a hand through his hair. "You want me to stay away from her? Fine, done. But don't you dare doubt how I feel about you." "Then show me," I whispered. "Not with promises, with choices." The silence that followed was heavy, charged. Liam took a step forward, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, but I turned away before he could speak again. "I think you should go," I said, my voice shaking. He hesitated. I could hear the battle in his breathing. Then the soft sound of the door closing. I didn't cry until I was sure he was gone. Chapter 8. Vulnerability Laid Bare. The rain started just after midnight, steady against my window, a sound that usually lulled me to sleep. But not tonight. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the look in Liam's eyes before he left. Frustration, hurt, something that looked almost like fear. I hated that we'd ended the night like that. I hated more that part of me wanted to run after him, and part of me wanted to bolt the door and pretend I didn't care. The knock came just after 1 a.m. Soft, hesitant. I knew it was him before I even got up. When I opened the door, Liam stood there, hair damp from the rain, hands shoved in his pockets. He looked tired, like the fight had been gnawing at him as much as it had me. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice low. I stepped aside and he entered, bringing the scent of rain and the faint trace of his cologne. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the way your voice cracked." "That's because you hurt me," I said quietly. "I know." His eyes found mine, steady and unflinching now. "And I hate that I did. But I need you to understand something, Emma. Claire, she's a part of my past, not my future. The only reason I didn't tell you about the dinner was because I didn't think it mattered. I didn't realize it would feel like betrayal." "It's not just the dinner," I admitted, arms folded. "It's that I've never been sure where I stand with you. We've been friends so long, but now it feels like I'm standing on a line, and you could push me either way at any moment." His brow furrowed, and when he stepped closer, his voice dropped. "Emma, you've never been on a line. You've always been the center. Every date I ever went on, every girl I tried to make it work with, I compared them to you, and they never measured up." My breath caught. "Then why didn't you say something before?" "Because I was a coward," he admitted, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. "Because you're my best friend and I was terrified of losing you. And now I'm terrified of losing you for real." The air between us seemed to tighten, every heartbeat echoing in the quiet. "Liam," I started, but he shook his head. "No, I need to say this before you tell me it's too late. I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you since that night in senior year when we stayed up till dawn on your porch, talking about nothing and everything. And every time I imagine my future, you're in it. Not as my friend, as my partner, my person." Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them back. "You can't just say that after years of silence and expect me to—" "I don't expect anything," he interrupted. "I just needed you to know the truth. Because whatever happens, I can't go back to pretending." The vulnerability in his eyes was unlike anything I'd seen in him before. Raw, unshielded, almost fragile. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. No matter how much he scared me, no matter how high the risk, I still wanted to step closer. Chapter 9. The First Kiss in the New Light. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air felt like it was holding its breath with us, waiting. Liam stood there, rainwater clinging to his shirt, his confession still hanging between us like something fragile and breakable. My mind screamed at me to be careful, to think it through, to not let one impulsive moment change everything. But my heart was tired of being cautious. "Emma," he said softly, almost as if saying my name hurt. "If you need time—" I took a step toward him. His eyes flickered in surprise. "Time won't change the fact that you're my best friend," I said, my voice trembling. "Or the fact that you've been in my heart longer than I care to admit." His breath caught, and in the dim light of my living room, his gaze dropped briefly to my lips. My pulse thudded in my ears. We'd stood like this before, too close, teetering on the edge, but we had always pulled back. This time, something was different. "Liam," my voice was barely more than a whisper. "If we do this, there's no going back." His hand lifted slowly, almost hesitant until his fingertips brushed my cheek. The warmth of his touch seeped into my skin, steadying the chaos inside me. "Then let's not go back," he murmured. The world seemed to shrink until it was just him and me and the rain tapping at the windows, and then his lips were on mine. It wasn't the clumsy, curious kiss of teenagers testing boundaries. It was slow, deliberate, like he'd been holding it back for years and finally decided to let it all pour out. The moment his hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, I felt something deep inside me crack open. This wasn't just attraction. This was every unspoken word, every shared look, every laugh and late-night talk woven into one breathless moment. When we finally broke apart, my forehead rested against his, and my heart was pounding so hard I thought he could hear it. "Wow," I whispered, half dazed. He let out a soft, shaky laugh. "Yeah, that's pretty much how I pictured it." I pulled back enough to search his eyes. "You've pictured this?" "Every day," he admitted without hesitation. "But the real thing's better." That should have made me melt, and maybe it did, but reality still lingered at the edges of my thoughts. "This changes everything, Liam." "I know," he said, and there was no hesitation, no fear in his voice now. "And I'm okay with that. The question is, are you?" My chest tightened. "I don't know. I'm scared of ruining what we have." He took my hands, his thumbs brushing over my knuckles in slow circles. "We've been through fights, distance, bad decisions, and still found our way back to each other. I don't think loving you is going to ruin us. I think it's the thing that will finally make sense of everything." It was hard to argue with that when his sincerity was staring me right in the face. And deep down I knew I'd been dancing around this truth for far too long. I squeezed his hands. "Okay." His brows lifted. "Okay. You're willing to try?" I nodded. "I'm willing to try." The smile that spread across his face wasn't the playful grin I was used to. It was softer, warmer. And when he kissed me again, I realized this wasn't the start of something entirely new. It was the next chapter of something that had been waiting to be written all along. Chapter 10, Testing the Waters. The next morning, everything felt different. Not in a bad way, just in a how do I act now way. I padded into the kitchen, still in my pajama shorts, and found Liam already there, leaning against the counter with a mug of coffee. He looked so at ease, like he belonged here. Maybe he always had. "Morning," he said, his voice low and rough in a way that made my stomach flip. "Morning," I replied, and suddenly I was hyper-aware of the fact that we had kissed. More than kissed. We had stepped over that invisible line we'd been tiptoeing around for years. He set his mug down and crossed the room toward me. My heart pounded faster with each step he took. "You're staring at me," he said, smirking. "I'm thinking," I said, a little defensively. "Thinking about running away before things get complicated?" His tone was teasing, but there was something vulnerable in his eyes. I shook my head quickly. "No, just adjusting. This is new, Liam." He nodded, and to my relief, didn't push. "Fair enough. We'll figure it out together." That sounded so simple. Too simple. But when he reached out and brushed his thumb across my jaw before heading back to the counter, I realized maybe it didn't have to be complicated. We decided to spend the day together, something we'd done 1,000 times before, but now with an undercurrent I couldn't quite name. Every touch felt charged, every glance lingered just a beat too long. When we walked through the local farmer's market, Liam's hand brushed mine, then slipped into it. My first instinct was to look around, wondering who might see us. His fingers tightened slightly as if he could feel my hesitation. "Still with me?" he murmured. "Yeah," I said, though my voice was soft. But as the day went on, I realized I wasn't just testing the waters of being with him. I was testing the waters of letting myself be seen with him. Not as best friends, not as something undefined, but as us. Later, over lunch at a little outdoor cafe, he leaned in, elbows on the table. "So, tell me, what's running through that head of yours right now?" I poked at my sandwich. "That this feels good, but I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop." "Why?" he asked gently. "Because it always does. People get close, things change, and suddenly they're not the same anymore." He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "Emma, you've known me through every version of myself. College Liam, broke Liam, grumpy Liam, And you're still here. I'm not going anywhere just because I get to kiss you now. His words made my throat tighten. You make it sound so easy. Because it is, he said simply. For the first time that day, I let myself relax. We talked, we laughed, and by the time we walked back to my apartment, my nerves had settled into something quieter, something warmer. When we reached my door, he paused, leaning against the frame. So, day one of being more than friends. How'd I do? I smiled. Not bad. You might just get a second date. Second date? He echoed with mock offense. I've been auditioning for this role for years. I rolled my eyes, but my smile wouldn't fade. And when he kissed me goodnight, soft, lingering, promising more, I realized that maybe the water we were testing wasn't as deep and dangerous as I thought. Maybe it was exactly where I was meant to be. Chapter 11. The first challenge. 2 days later, it happened. The first crack in our shiny, brand new More Than Friends bubble. It was a Thursday evening, and I'd just finished work when I stopped by the little bookstore on Main. I was planning to surprise Liam with a copy of the travel photography book he'd been eyeing for weeks. The moment I stepped inside, though, my smile faltered. Liam was there, and so was Claire. Claire, the girl who used to linger around him at parties in college, the one who once told me she couldn't imagine him dating someone as safe as me. She was laughing at something he'd said, leaning far too close for casual conversation. For a moment, I froze in the doorway. My brain scrambled to make sense of it. We hadn't exactly defined what we were yet, but we'd been holding hands in public, kissing in my kitchen, and spending almost every night together since that first kiss. Surely that meant something. Liam spotted me before I could slip away. His face lit up until he saw my expression. Emma, he said, coming over quickly. Hey, I was just... With Claire, I finished for him, my voice tighter than I meant. Claire offered me a sweet, too innocent smile. We were just catching up. I didn't realize you two were... She waved her hand vaguely, letting the sentence hang. I didn't give her the satisfaction of an answer. I'll see you later, Liam. I turned to leave, but he caught my wrist. Wait, please, can we talk? About what? How you ran into your college almost flame and forgot to mention it? My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated how small it made me sound. It's not like that, he said quickly. I came in here to grab a book and she happened to be here. That's it. Maybe he was telling the truth. But standing there with Claire still watching us, I couldn't stop the old doubts from crawling up my spine. I just need some space right now, I muttered, pulling away. That night, I didn't answer his texts or his call. By the next morning, I half expected him to show up at my door. Instead, he sent one simple message. I'm here when you're ready to believe me. And that, annoyingly, made me miss him more. By Saturday, the silence between us was unbearable. I found myself walking to his apartment without fully deciding to. He opened the door before I could knock twice. You came, he said, relief softening his eyes. I hate fighting with you, I admitted. I hate it too, he said. Emma, I swear to you there's nothing going on with Claire. There never was. You're the one I want. Only you. It should have been enough. But part of me still worried about how easy it would be for this to break. You can say that now, I whispered. But what about months from now? Years? What if I'm not enough? His jaw tightened. Don't you get it? You've always been enough. I just needed you to see me the way I've always seen you. I swallowed hard. His sincerity left no room for doubt, and it scared me, because it meant the only thing left in our way was me. So I took a breath and said the words I'd been holding back for days. I believe you. The way he pulled me into his arms felt like the first real step toward us. Messy, imperfect, but ours. Chapter 12. Crossing the Line. The first snowfall of the season arrived the following week. Big, soft flakes drifted past my apartment window, muffling the usual city noise and making the world feel smaller, quieter, like it existed just for us. Liam had texted that morning, "Dinner at my place. No excuses. Wear something warm." When I showed up, he greeted me with a grin and a blanket already draped over his arm. "We're going to the roof," he announced. "The roof?" I asked, glancing toward the frosted window. "It's freezing out there." "That's why I said warm clothes." He held up a thermos and 2 mugs. "Hot chocolate. Trust me." I followed him up the narrow stairwell until we reached the rooftop door. When he pushed it open, I gasped. He'd set up a little picnic, 2 folding chairs, a blanket on the ground, fairy lights strung across the railing. Snow dusted everything, catching in the warm glow. It was simple, imperfect, and breathtaking. "This is..." I trailed off, unable to find the right word. "I wanted to give you a night you'd remember," he said, handing me a steaming mug. "Something that's just ours." We sat close, our knees touching under the shared blanket. The snow kept falling, and the world below felt miles away. For a while, we just talked, about old memories, ridiculous childhood dreams, the things we'd never told each other when we were just friends. I learned he once thought about dropping out of college to travel the world with a camera. He learned I used to write poetry in secret. It felt easy, natural, like it had always been meant to happen this way. At one point, I leaned back in my chair and whispered, "This feels dangerous." He turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Dangerous how?" "Like, if I fall any harder, there's no going back." He didn't look away. "Then fall." The word settled in my chest like a promise I'd been waiting to hear for years. I didn't even think before I leaned in. This kiss was different from the first one. It wasn't fueled by shock or impulse. It was deliberate, slow, the kind of kiss that asked for trust and offered it back. When we pulled away, my breath caught in the cold air. "We're not just friends anymore, are we?" His hand cupped my cheek. "No. We crossed that line the moment you kissed me that night in your kitchen. This is us finally admitting it." The admission left me both exhilarated and terrified. I'd never been this close to him before. Not just physically, but in the way that mattered. We stayed on the roof until our fingers went numb. Back inside, he handed me one of his sweatshirts and ordered takeout. We ended up on his couch, curled under the same blanket, the city lights spilling through the window. "Emma," he said softly, as if speaking my name too loudly would break the moment. "I'm not going to pretend I know exactly where we're going from here, but I know I want to be in it with you." And in that moment, I decided I was done being afraid of what we could be. "Then I'm in," I whispered. The smile that broke across his face made every risk feel worth it. Chapter 13. Defining Love. The morning after the rooftop, I woke up in my own apartment with my phone buzzing beside me. Liam, breakfast, my treat. I stared at the message for a long moment, smiling in spite of the butterflies in my stomach. We'd kissed again last night, really kissed, and for the first time in years I'd gone to bed without wondering what he truly felt about me. But now it was real. When I arrived at the little cafe we'd been going to since college, Liam was already there, seated at our usual corner booth. He stood when he saw me, that familiar mix of easy charm and quiet intensity in his eyes. "You ordered without me?" I teased, sliding into the seat. "Just coffee. I figured I should wait before making major life decisions for us," he said with a grin. It was easy, that banter, but beneath it, I could feel something heavier, a conversation we'd been circling around since last night. Halfway through breakfast, Liam set down his mug and leaned forward. "Emma, about us." My heart stuttered. "Okay. I don't want to keep this vague. I don't want to be sort of together or seeing where it goes. I've known you most of my life, and I don't want anyone else." The words sank deep, warm, and certain. "So, You're saying you're my boyfriend now? I asked, half joking to cover the tremor in my voice. I'm saying I've been yours for years, he said simply. I just didn't know how to tell you without risking what we had. Something in me melted. I reached across the table, threading my fingers through his. I think it's too late for risk. We're already in it. We finished breakfast wrapped in this new fragile clarity. Two people who had danced around each other for so long, finally stepping into the center. It should have been the perfect day. But when we walked out of the cafe, my phone rang. It was my mother, her voice sharp with worry. Emma, honey, you need to come home. Your dad's in the hospital. The world tilted. I barely heard Liam asking if I was okay before we were in his car, speeding toward the hospital. The entire drive, I stared out the window, my chest tight. It wasn't life-threatening, Mom assured me on the phone, but it was serious enough to scare me. Liam stayed silent, his hand occasionally brushing mine as if to remind me he was there. At the hospital, I rushed into my father's room. He was pale but awake, his smile faint when he saw me. Just a scare, pumpkin, he murmured. Don't look so worried. I stayed by his side until the doctor came in, explaining his condition and the need for follow-up care. When I stepped back into the hallway, Liam was leaning against the wall, watching me with quiet concern. You don't have to stay, I said, even though part of me hoped he would. I'm not going anywhere, he replied. This is what being with someone means, Emma. You're not going through it alone. It hit me then. This was love, not the giddy rush of first kisses, but the steady presence when things got messy. Later, when we left the hospital, the night air was cold enough to sting. Liam walked beside me, close enough that our shoulders brushed. Earlier, I said, you asked me to define us. I think I know my answer now. Yeah? He asked. I love you, not just in the way I've always loved you as my best friend, but in the way I want to build something with you, no matter what happens. His breath left him in a rush, and before I could blink, he pulled me into his arms. Good, he murmured into my hair, because I'm not letting you go. And just like that, we weren't navigating the what if anymore. We were in it. Chapter 14. Final test. 2 weeks into officially dating Liam, I learned something important. Falling for your best friend is easy. Keeping that relationship steady when life tries to pull you in opposite directions, that's the hard part. It started with a phone call, again. Only this time it wasn't from my mom. It was from my boss. Emma, I know it's short notice, but the company wants someone to head the New York branch for 3 months. Your name came up first. 3 months. Across the country. A dream opportunity I'd worked toward for years. Yet all I could think about was the fact that Liam and I had just started this new chapter. That night, we met at his apartment. I told myself I'd wait until after dinner to bring it up, but the words tumbled out before I even took off my coat. They want me in New York for 3 months. Liam blinked, setting down the glass of water he'd been pouring. When? In 2 weeks. Silence stretched between us, heavy and complicated. His expression was unreadable, like he was weighing something in his head. This is a big deal for you, he said finally. You've been working toward this for years. I know, but I gestured between us. I don't want to put us through long distance before we've even found our rhythm. His gaze softened, but there was a shadow in it. If you're asking me to tell you not to go, I can't. You'd regret it. The words stung, even though I knew he meant them out of love. So that's it? You're fine with it? I'm not fine with it, he said, stepping closer. But I'm also not going to be the reason you hold back from something important. I've done enough of that in the past. It should have been comforting, but instead, it left me feeling unsettled. Part of me wanted him to fight for me, to say he couldn't bear the thought of me leaving. We spent the next 2 weeks dancing around the tension. We still laughed, still kissed, still shared quiet nights on the couch, but it was as if an invisible countdown clock hung over us. On my last night in town, we met at the park where we'd spent countless summers as teenagers. The swings creaked in the wind, and the playground lights cast soft halos across the grass. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice small. "Not of New York. Of us. What if we can't make it work from that far apart?" He reached for my hand, his fingers warm against the chill. "We'll make it work because I'm not letting distance take you away from me again." I looked at him then, really looked, and saw the truth in his eyes. Steady, unflinching, and fiercely mine. The next morning, he drove me to the airport. We didn't do the tearful, dramatic goodbye you see in movies. Instead, he cupped my face in his hands, kissed me slow and certain, and whispered, "3 months is nothing. We've already survived years of not knowing." I boarded the plane with my heart in 2 places, half in New York, half with him. Those months weren't easy. There were missed calls, time zone headaches, and moments where loneliness crept in. But there were also late-night video chats that left us laughing until I forgot I was tired, surprise care packages on my doorstep, and texts from him that always seemed to arrive when I needed them most. By the time my flight touched down back home, I knew. We'd passed the test, not because nothing had gone wrong, but because when it did, we'd chosen each other anyway. And as I stepped off the plane, scanning the crowd until I found him, I realized the truth. I wasn't coming home to a boyfriend. I was coming home to the person I wanted for the rest of my life. Chapter 15. The Promise. The moment I stepped into the arrivals hall, my eyes found him. Liam stood just past the barrier, tall and solid in his navy jacket, his hands shoved deep into his pockets like he'd been there for hours. When he spotted me, his face lit up, like the sun breaking through clouds after weeks of rain. I didn't walk toward him. I ran. His arms closed around me, pulling me against him so tightly it felt like he was trying to erase every mile and every day we'd spent apart. I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing in the scent of him, warm, familiar, and home. "You're here," he murmured into my hair, his voice thick. "I told you I'd come back," I whispered, pulling back just enough to look at him. "Did you doubt me?" Not for a second. His smile was soft, but there was something behind it, something steady, certain, and forever. We didn't go straight home. Instead, Liam drove us to the beach, the same one where we'd spent countless afternoons when we were younger. The winter air was brisk, the ocean restless under a silver sky. We walked along the shoreline in silence, our hands intertwined. The sound of the waves filled the quiet spaces between us. Finally, Liam stopped, turning to face me. "I've been thinking about this for months," he began, "about how much time we've already lost. About how, for years, I convinced myself you deserved someone better than me, someone who wouldn't break your heart by being too afraid to love you back." My throat tightened. "Liam." He shook his head gently like he wasn't finished. "But then you kissed me, and everything I'd been holding back cracked open. I realized I'd rather risk everything than live another day pretending you weren't the most important part of my life." The wind tugged at my hair as I searched his face, feeling my pulse race. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want to wait anymore." He reached into his jacket pocket and my heart stuttered. He didn't pull out a ring. Not yet. Instead, he held out a small silver chain with a delicate charm in the shape of a compass. "It's not a proposal," he said quickly, though his eyes held a promise all their own. "But it's my way of telling you that no matter where you go or how far apart we are, you'll always find your way back to me, because I'm not letting you go again, ever." I swallowed hard, my eyes blurring as I took the charm from him. "You're my home, Liam. You've always been my home." When he kissed me, it wasn't hurried or desperate. It was deep, unhurried, and sure. A seal, a vow, a quiet claim that said, "We've found our way, and we're never losing it again." We stayed on the beach until the sun began to dip, painting the sky in gold and rose. Somewhere between the sound of the waves and the warmth of his hand in mine, I realized something important. This wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning. 3 months apart had tested us, but love wasn't about never being tested. It was about passing those tests together. And we had. As we walked back to the car, his arm around my shoulders, I glanced at the horizon and smiled. Whatever came next, distance, challenges, change, we'd face it as we always had, side by side. Because one kiss had changed our world, and every kiss after would keep building it. Epilogue. 1 year later. The living room was a chaos of balloons, ribbons, and half-inflated decorations. I had a roll of tape stuck to my wrist, a cupcake in one hand, and a very smug Liam holding the other end of a banner that read, "Happy First Anniversary." "You realize you spelled anniversary wrong the first time, right?" I teased, eyeing the wobbly letters he'd cut out of gold paper. "Hey," he said with mock offense, "I'm a master at fixing cars, not making Pinterest-worthy banners." I laughed, shaking my head, but my heart swelled as I looked at him. Messy hair, warm smile, eyes that still watched me like I was the only person in the room. A year ago, we'd stood on a windy beach with a compass charm between us, promising not to waste another second. We'd kept that promise. Through his late-night work shifts, my book deadlines, and the occasional arguments about who forgot to buy milk, we'd learned what love really looked like. It wasn't just the soft moments, though there were plenty of those. It was the way he'd leave me little notes in my laptop bag, or how he'd warm my hands in the winter without even thinking about it. It was the quiet apology after a disagreement, the shared laughter in the kitchen at midnight, the unshakable feeling that no matter what the world threw at us, we'd weather it together. "Okay," Liam said, stepping back to admire his work. "Banners up, cupcakes are out, music's ready. Only thing missing is you sitting down and letting me spoil you." I arched a brow. "Spoil me? What exactly do you have planned, Mr. Weston?" He grinned, a little mischievous. "You'll see." When I finally sat on the couch, he handed me a small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. Inside was a delicate gold ring, simple, elegant, with a tiny diamond set in the middle. "It's not a proposal," he said, echoing the words from that day on the beach. "But it's another promise. One of many I plan to keep for the rest of our lives." I didn't need a proposal. I didn't need a grand gesture. I had the man who'd been my best friend, my safe place, my greatest love. And somehow that felt like more than enough. I leaned in, kissed him softly, and whispered, "Here's to every year after this one." The compass charm still hung from my neck, warm against my skin, reminding me of the moment everything had changed. But as Liam pulled me close and we sank into the couch, laughing over cupcakes and badly cut gold letters, I realized something. That kiss might have started our story, but it was the everyday moments that would keep writing it, and I couldn't wait for every single one.
Thank you for staying till the end. If you enjoy the video, please hit the like button, share, and comment. We'll love to hear from you.